Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today is Thursday, February 5th, 2026.
It is indeed.
And if you've had a chance to, glance at the news ticker this morning, you might be feeling that familiar tightening in your chest.
I think a lot of people are. It's that sense that the world is just spinning a little bit faster than you can keep up with sometimes.
It's a lot.
It's a very busy morning. We have major treaties expiring, some really odd weather patterns popping up, and just significant movement in the tech sector.
Which is exactly why we're here. We want to hit the pause button for a bit.
Right.
We are not just going to read headlines at you. The goal, as it always is to take this huge stack of reporting, and we have a ton today.
We really do.
We're looking at everything from, astrophysics journals and space.com to foreign policy, the South China Morning Post, even some new reports from the UN.
And the idea is to figure out how all these disparate pieces, how they actually fit together.
We want to move past the simple what happened and get to the how and the why.
Because today, specifically, we have a few stories that, on the surface, feel completely disconnected.
Totally random, yeah. Gold jewelry.
Nuclear treaties.
And frozen lizards.
And frozen blizzards. But when you look a little closer, you start to see these really interesting thematic threads start to emerge.
Yeah, threads about origins and also threads about protection.
That's a great way to put it.
So we're going to start way, way out in the cosmos with a new understanding of where heavy metals actually come from. And spoiler alert, it is violent.
Extremely violent. Then we're going to dig deep into the Earth's mantle to look at these enormous, well, they're calling them blobs. They're messing with our magnetic field.
Okay, then we have to have a really serious conversation about the geopolitical landscape. Because today is the day. The New START treaty expires.
It does. And if you aren't, a nuclear policy wonk, that might sound kind of dry.
It sounds like alphabet soup.
It does. But what it really means is the effective removal of the guardrails on the world's two largest nuclear arsenals.
So we need to unpack what the world looks like starting tomorrow.
We do. And from there, we'll look at a pretty terrifying new microwave weapon coming out of China.
And on a lighter note, why AI is now trying to manage your dating life.
Because we're apparently all too tired to swipe anymore.
I think that's true. And yes, we promise we will explain why it is literally raining iguanas in Florida.
It's a full slate.
It is. So let's get into it. I want to start with the science, and specifically the astrophysics.
Okay.
Because I think most people, if you just ask them on the street, where does gold come from? They'd say,
A mine.
a mine. Or maybe if they remember high school chemistry, they might say a supernova.
Right. And for a long time, that was the standard model. A massive star explodes, and in that incredible explosion, heavier elements are fused.
And that's true for a lot of things.
It is. It's true for iron, for oxygen, for carbon. But for gold, for platinum, these really, really heavy elements.
The top of the periodic table.
Exactly. What scientists call the belay process elements. They require something even more extreme.
More extreme than a standard supernova. I mean, the phrase standard supernova is already kind of funny.
It is, isn't it? That's already one of the most violent events in the universe. But no, even that is not enough to forge gold.
So it's not just about the energy then?
It's not just energy, it's about neutron density. That's the key.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, to make gold, you have to jam a whole lot of neutrons into an atomic nucleus very, very quickly.
How quickly?
Before it has a chance to decay. So you need an environment that is just saturated with neutrons.
And a supernova isn't dense enough.
Not dense enough with neutrons. So there's a new breakdown on space.com looking at a study that used supercomputers to simulate what are called neutron star mergers.
Okay, so we're taking two neutron stars, which, if I remember, are already the ultra-dense cores of dead, massive stars.
Incredibly dense.
Yeah.
A teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh billions of tons.
Right, so we're taking two of those and just smashing them together.
Exactly. And when these things collide, it creates an event called a kilonova.
A kilonova.
And what the simulation shows is that this collision releases such an unbelievably intense flood of neutrons that it triggers this rapid neutron capture process.
The R process you mentioned.
That's the one. It's alchemy on a galactic scale.
So the study is suggesting that, the gold ring you might be wearing on your finger, it wasn't just cooked up in a star.
It was forged in the violent death spiral of two city-sized atomic nuclei smashing into each other.
At a significant fraction of the speed of light.
It's just an unbelievable level of violence.
That adds a bit of romance to a wedding band, doesn't it?
Slight chuckle.
Yeah.
Violent romance, maybe?
You're wearing the debris of a galactic car crash.
That is one way to put it. But what's so cool is how this connects to modern science, how we actually validated the theory.
Right, this isn't just a computer model.
No, the study links these kilonovae directly to gravitational waves. Remember back in 2017, the big detection, GW170817.
Oh yeah, that was huge. That was the first time we heard, so to speak, the gravitational waves from colliding neutron stars.
Correct. And that event was the Rosetta Stone for this entire field. Because we didn't just detect the ripple in space-time.
We saw it too.
Telescopes saw the flash of light that followed. And when they analyzed the spectrum of that light, it showed the clear chemical signature of heavy metals being created.
Oh, platinum.
Exactly. So this new simulation basically confirms the mechanism we witnessed. We are, for the first time, really starting to map the genealogy of the periodic table.
It's just fascinating that we're getting this granular about events that happen millions, maybe hundreds of millions of light years away.
It's incredible.
But speaking of heavy, mysterious things, let's look down for a minute, not up.
Okay.
You flagged a story from Science Daily about deep Earth mysteries.
I did. And this is one of those stories that just reminds you. We really know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deep interior of our own planet.
That's a wild thought.
It is. So scientists have been using seismic waves, sort of like a planetary ultrasound, to image the mantle.
The mantle being that thick layer of rock between the crust we live on and the core.
Right. And they've been able to define these two massive, and I mean massive, structures deep, deep down.
What are they calling them?
The technical term is LLSVPs.
LLSVPs.
Yeah, large, low shear velocity provinces.
Okay, that's a mouthful.
It is. Which is why in the geology world, they're often just called the blobs.
The blobs is so much catchier. I'm going with the blobs.
Me too. So there's one of these blobs under the Pacific Ocean and another one under Africa. And these things are continent-sized mountains of hot, dense, compressed rock.
And they just sit there.
Well, that's what we used to think. But the new research indicates they aren't just sitting there. They are dynamic, they move.
And where are they sitting?
Right on top of the liquid outer core. And because they sit on top of the outer core, which is what generates our magnetic field, they influence it.
Okay, influence it how?
Yeah.
Because the magnetic field is, well, it's pretty important.
It's fundamentally important. It's the shield that stops the solar wind from stripping away our atmosphere and boiling our oceans.
We don't want anything messing with it.
We do not.
Yeah.
So the outer core is liquid iron, right?
Yeah.
It swirls and churns around, creating what's called a geodynamo. That's the engine of the magnetic field.
Okay.
These blobs sitting on top of it, they act sort of like a lid on a pot of boiling soup. They change how the heat escapes from the core up into the mantle.
Ah, I see.
And if you change the heat flow, you change the flow of the liquid iron.
And if you change the flow of the iron, you change the magnetic field.
You change the magnetic field, its shape, its strength, everything.
So are we talking about the magnetic poles flipping? I know that's a favorite topic for doomsday preppers.
The study does suggest these blobs have contributed to field reversals in the past, absolutely. But it's not going to happen next Tuesday.
Good to know.
But understanding the geometry and the movement of these blobs helps us model the long-term stability of that shield. It turns out the Earth's interior is a lot more lumpy and chaotic than those smooth layers we all saw in our textbooks.
It's a bit unsettling, honestly. The idea of continent-sized blobs shifting around thousands of miles beneath our feet, it makes the ground feel a little less solid.
It does. But it creates a nice parallel, actually.
How so?
We rely on the magnetic field as our shield against things from space, but sometimes the threat, or in this case the spectacle, penetrates that shield, and we have a comet inbound.
Right. Comet C 2026A1. I've seen this mentioned online as the MAPS comet.
That's the one.
And Space.com seems pretty hyped up about it, but comets are usually a bit of a gamble, aren't they? They can fizzle out.
They absolutely can. David Levy, the famous comet hunter, he always said, comets are like cats. They have tails, and they do precisely what they want.
I like that.
But the orbital parameters on C 2026A1 are very promising. It belongs to a family of comets that, historically, get very, very bright as they approach the sun.
So what's the prediction?
It's diving toward the inner solar system right now, and the best guess is that it could become a naked eye object by early spring.
Naked eye is the holy grail for this stuff, being able to just step out on your porch and see it without a telescope.
It is. It connects us to that really ancient human experience of watching the sky change in real time.
So while we're all looking up from our backyards, we also have a robot that's looking down at the dirt on Mars. NASA put out an update on the Curiosity rover.
Good old Curiosity.
Yeah.
It really feels like it's been there forever.
It's been a while, since 2012.
Almost 14 years now. So it just came back online after what's called a solar conjunction.
That's the period where the sun is physically between Earth and Mars, blocking radio signal.
Exactly. So it was on its own for a few weeks. But it's back, and the update had this one detail in it that I found incredibly poignant.
Was it about the TMAH?
Yes. So Curiosity is at a site they've named Novato Sajama. It's analyzing a break in rock, looking for signs of past life. To do that, it uses a very special wet chemistry experiment.
Involving a solvent.
A solvent called TMAH, that's tetramethyl ammonium hydroxide. It allows the rover's oven to detect complex organic molecules that might otherwise be destroyed by the heat of the analysis.
Okay, so it's a crucial tool, and the catch is...
They just opened the last container.
Oh, the last one. Ever.
The last one. Curiosity launched with a finite supply of these little cups of solvent. It has been carefully rationing them for over a decade. And now, the team on Earth has commanded it to use the final one for this experiment.
Wow. That really drives home the reality of these missions. It's not like Star Trek where you can just go to the replicator and ask for more supplies.
Not at all. When it's gone, it's gone.
It must change the whole psychology of the mission for the science team.
It has to. Every single data point that comes back from this specific experiment is now the final chapter of that particular book. It's a resource cliff.
And speaking of resources in biology and space, Space.com also ran a piece that really bridges the gap between robotic exploration and, well, human colonization.
A topic that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
It really does, but they argue we have to discuss it. Space reproduction.
Yeah, the headline was something like, "It's time to think about human reproduction in space."
Which sounds like a pickup line from a bad sci-fi movie.
It does. But they're talking about the very serious medical ethics of it.
Right, because we have these grand plans for Mars bases and moon colonies.
We do. But we have almost zero data on mammalian reproduction in partial gravity or in high radiation environments.
And we already know what microgravity does to a fully grown adult astronaut. It destroys bone density, it messes with the fluid pressure in your brain.
I can't even imagine what it would do to a developing fetus.
And that's the terrifying part, isn't it? Their article argues that before we can ethically send people on one-way trips to colonize another world, we have an obligation to know if a pregnancy is even survivable.
Or if the constant radiation load outside of Earth's magnetic field would cause severe genetic mutations.
But how do you even test for that? I mean, you can't ethically just send pregnant women to orbit for 9 months and see what happens.
No, absolutely not. You have to start with animal models, mice, eventually primates. But even then, the translation to human biology isn't perfect.
So what's the risk?
The risk is that we get the propulsion technology right, we figure out how to get to Mars in 6 months, but we hit a hard biological wall.
A wall where we realize we can go there, but we can't stay there, not as a self-sustaining species.
We might be biologically tethered to 1G gravity in Earth's magnetic shield. It's a really sobering check on that grand vision of becoming a multiplanetary species.
You can build a rocket, but you can't build the baby.
Exactly. Now, moving from the fragility of biology to the fragility of electronics.
Oh.
Let's talk about this microwave weapon out of China. This has been all over the defense blogs, and the South China Morning Post has a big write-up on it.
The TPG-1000Cs. They really need to work on their naming conventions.
They do. Rolls right off the tongue.
Oh.
But the specs are what's really serious here. This is a high-power microwave weapon, an HPM.
And it was developed by their Northwest Institute of Nuclear Technology.
That's right. The report says it can fire a pulse of 20 gigawatts.
Okay, 20 gigawatts. Put that into perspective. A big power plant, like the Hoover Dam, generates about, 2 gigawatts?
About 2, yeah.
So how do you fit 10 Hoover Dams worth of power onto a truck?
That's the engineering magic, and that's what makes it such a threat. It's not generating 20 gigawatts continuously.
It's a pulse.
It's a pulse. It uses a technique called pulse compression. It stores up energy over time in massive capacitors and then releases it all in a nanosecond-long burst.
So for that tiny fraction of a second, the power output is just astronomical.
It is.
And the target isn't people, right? This isn't a death ray.
No, not directly. It's what's called a soft kill weapon. It's designed to fry electronics.
How does it do that?
The microwave pulse is shaped to couple with the internal wiring of electronics. So if a drone swarm is coming at you, or a cruise missile,
Right.
this thing fires a pulse that induces these massive voltage surges inside their circuits. Just fries the chips.
So the drone doesn't blow up.
It just turns into a brick and falls out of the sky. The missile's guidance system just goes dead.
And the report mentioned it's compact enough to fit on a truck or even an aircraft. That has to change the tactical game.
It completely does. If you can scramble the brains of an F-35 fighter jet or an entire drone swarm without firing a single bullet.
You create a zone of denial, an electronic wall.
Exactly. And it really highlights this big shift in warfare, away from kinetic weapons, bullets, and missiles, and toward directed energy.
Because bullets run out. Missiles are incredibly expensive.
But as long as you have a generator, you can keep firing microwaves.
So while we're on the subject of manipulating electromagnetic waves, let's look at a story from Science Daily about something called skirmions.
Skirmions. It sounds like a monster from Dungeons & Dragons, doesn't it?
It really does. Roll for initiative against the skirmion.
But it's actually a huge breakthrough in topology and photonics.
Okay, topology. That's the mathematical study of shapes, right?
That's right. And a skirmion is basically a special kind of knot in the electromagnetic field.
A knot of light?
A knot of light. The researchers figured out how to create these tiny donut-shaped light pulses. And the crucial thing about a donut shape, or a torus in topology, is that it's incredibly stable. You can't comb the hair on a donut flat without creating a cowlick.
The Hairy Ball theorem, right?
You got it. So because of that inherent structural stability, these little light donuts are incredibly resistant to degradation or noise.
What does that mean in practical terms?
It means you can send them over long distances or through turbulent air or bounce them off things, and they hold their shape. They hold the data they're carrying.
And the application for this is faster internet.
Much faster. We're talking about terahertz band communication.
So we're currently rolling out 5G, and people are talking about 6G. This is the step beyond that.
Way beyond. The data explosion we're seeing, especially with AI and high-def video, it requires pipes that are just massive. Skirmions could be a way to pack way more data into a wireless signal without it breaking up and becoming garbled.
So speaking of that data explosion in AI, let's do our AI roundup. Because it feels like every single week there's a new breakthrough that solves a problem I didn't even know I had. Like TechCrunch is reporting that Tinder is using AI to fix my dating life now.
Yes. This is a classic case of a tech company trying to solve a problem created by their own product with more product.
What's the problem they're trying to solve?
Tinder's own data shows that 78% of their users are feeling swipe fatigue. They're just burned out.
Yeah, because it's a gamified endless loop of snap judgments. I can see that.
Right. So their solution is a new AI that will scan your phone's camera roll, select what it thinks are your best photos for your profile, and help curate your matches to reduce the time you spend swiping.
But wait, isn't that just outsourcing the most personal part of dating? Here, robot, you decide who I find attractive and what I look like.
It absolutely is. It's optimizing the process, but you could argue it removes the human agency from it. But the numbers behind all this stuff are just huge.
Like Google's Gemini?
Google just announced their Gemini model now has 750 million monthly active users.
That's a staggering number.
It's a full-on arms race with OpenAI's ChatGPT.
And 11 Labs, the AI voice company, they just raised a mountain of cash.
A huge mountain, $180 million. They're now valued at $3.3 billion.
Wow.
And that valuation tells you that investors believe synthetic voice technology is going to be absolutely everywhere, in video games, in movie dubbing, in audiobooks, in customer service bots.
But there is a very dark side to all this generative capability. We saw a report from UNICEF and a really stark warning from the UN Secretary General that was. It was genuinely disturbing.
It was. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, he warned that AI is moving at light speed, but completely without guardrails.
And the UNICEF report put a number on it.
A horrible number. They found that 1.2 million children had their personal images manipulated into deepfakes in the last year alone. They have a term for it. Nudification.
That is just sickening.
It's horrifying. The technology to take a normal photo of a person and use AI to digitally strip their clothes off is now widely available and easy to use.
And the legal system is lagging years behind.
Completely. We are seeing a crisis where the privacy and the dignity of minors are being violated on an industrial scale, and these social media platforms are struggling, or you could say, failing to stop it.
It feels like we're in this brief window of anarchy where the tools are out there, but the consequences haven't caught up yet.
That's the history of the internet in a nutshell, isn't it? But speaking of the history of the internet, I want to pivot to a small but really positive story.
Okay, I could use one.
The Internet Archive.
The Wayback Machine. I use it all the time for research.
Me too. Well, TechCrunch reported that they've released a new browser plugin. You know link rot, right?
Oh, yeah. When you're reading an old article, maybe from 2015, you click a source link to see the data, and you just get a 404 error page.
The digital dead end. It's incredibly frustrating for researchers, for everyone.
So what does the plugin do?
It's simple, but it's brilliant. It detects that 404 error, and it automatically reroutes you to the archived version of that exact page as it existed in the Wayback Machine.
That's like a self-healing internet.
It is. It's a small thing, but it's a powerful reminder that the web shouldn't just be a stream of ephemeral content that disappears. It's a library. And we need to preserve the citations, preserve our shared digital history.
Preservation.
Yep.
That's a good theme to carry us into our next section. Because while we are thankfully preserving digital links, it seems like we're actively failing at preserving the diplomatic frameworks that keep the world from, blowing itself up.
We are. And we need to shift gears pretty hard here into geopolitics. Because today, February 5th, 2026, is a date that historians are likely going to circle in their books.
This is the expiration of the New START nuclear treaty.
That's right.
So we've heard about New START for years, but for the listener who hasn't really tracked all the acronyms, what did this treaty actually do?
START stands for Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. And this was the last major pillar of arms control between the United States and Russia.
The last one.
The last one. It capped the number of deployed strategic warheads. We're talking the big city killer warheads on intercontinental ballistic missiles and submarines at 1,550 for each side.
But it was more than just a number, right?
So much more. The most important part was the verification regime.
Inspection.
On-site inspections. We could go to their missile silos and literally count the warheads. They could come to ours. We exchanged telemetry data on every single missile test.
So it created a baseline of transparency, the old Reagan line, trust but verify.
Exactly. It reduced the chances of a catastrophic miscalculation because both sides had a pretty good idea of what the other was doing.
And as of midnight tonight, that's all gone.
The legal mandate is gone. Now, Axios and the BBC are reporting that there is a sort of loose, informal handshake agreement to observe the limits for now.
But without the inspections, that's largely meaningless.
It's based entirely on trust. And trust is not exactly in high supply right now. If Russia decides to put 10 warheads on a missile instead of 3, we have no way to know for sure anymore. We are back to guessing games.
So why did it die? Was it just the war in Ukraine that killed it?
That was certainly the catalyst. Russia officially suspended its participation a while ago, blaming what it called U.S. hostility and its military support for Kyiv.
Their argument being?
Their argument was, why should we let you inspect our nuclear bases when your country is helping Ukraine attack our naval bases with drones?
But the U.S. also had some hesitations about just renewing it in its old form.
It did. And the reason can be summed up in one word: China.
Right, because China wasn't part of this treaty.
Not at all. The Pentagon looks at the Global Strategic Board and says, why are we locking ourselves into a bilateral limit with Russia when China is in the middle of a massive expansion of its own nuclear arsenal and isn't bound by any treaty at all?
So the U.S. wants the next treaty to be trilateral.
Yeah.
U.S., Russia, and China.
That's the official position.
Yeah.
And China, for its part, has shown zero interest in joining. They say their arsenal is much smaller and purely defensive.
So we're basically entering a three-way arms race with no referee and no rule book.
That is the fear among arms control experts. We're moving from a relatively stable, if terrifying, bipolar Cold War dynamic to a much more complex and unpredictable multipolar competition. It's inherently more unstable.
And speaking of unstable situations, let's look at the actual conflict zones. There were talks held in Abu Dhabi.
That's right, in the United Arab Emirates, involving the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine.
And it creates this very strange split-screen moment, doesn't it?
It really does. You have these diplomats in extensive suits in a luxury hotel in the UAE trying to find what they call a negotiated solution.
And at the exact same time,
Al Jazeera reports that on the very same day, Russian shelling in the town of Drushkivka in Ukraine hit a marketplace and killed 7 civilians.
It is so hard to reconcile those two realities.
The rhetoric is just as divided.
Yeah.
You have the Russian Foreign Minister, Lavrov, in Abu Dhabi, accusing Ukrainian President Zelensky of dragging out the war for his own political survival.
And Zelensky, meanwhile, is calling on the West for more advanced weapons.
Exactly. The official reports say the talks were constructive.
Which is diplomat speak for.
Nobody stormed out of the room, but absolutely nothing was solved.
Right. And then we have the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made some comments regarding Iran.
Rubio is maintaining a very, very hawkish stance here. He said the U.S. is ready to talk to Iran, but then he immediately followed it up by saying he's not sure a deal can be reached.
That's setting the bar for expectations pretty low.
Well, you have to look at the context. Just this week, Iran's IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, seized 2 commercial vessels in the Persian Gulf.
And they issued a statement.
A very aggressive statement, threatening the U.S. with massacre and hell is provoked. It's not exactly friendly diplomatic language.
Yeah, and Rubio is adding preconditions to any talks.
He is. He's insisting that any new deal must cover not just Iran's nuclear program, but also his ballistic missile program.
Which, for Iran, is a non-starter.
Completely.
Yeah.
Iran considers its missiles to be a non-negotiable part of its national defense. So we're at a total impasse.
And it feels like a dangerous one. When diplomacy stalls, that's usually when kinetic action starts to look more appealing to some.
That's always the danger.
Okay, let's pivot from the Middle East to the U.S.-China relationship. We talked about the microwave weapon, but there's also a full-on economic war happening.
A minerals war, as some are calling it.
Right. The U.S. is putting together what they're calling a critical minerals trading bloc.
With the European Union and Japan.
And this is all about things like lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements.
It's about everything you need to build a modern economy. The guts of an EV battery, a smartphone, or the guidance system for an F-35 fighter jet.
And right now, China dominates that supply chain.
Completely. They don't necessarily mine all of it, but they process the vast majority of these minerals. And the West has woken up to the fact that that is a massive strategic choke point.
If Beijing decides to turn off the tap.
Western industry, from car manufacturing to defense, could grind to a halt. This bloc is an attempt to friend-shore that supply chain, to move it to allied countries.
And China's President Xi isn't just taking this quietly.
No, not at all. He had a phone call with President Trump, and according to the readouts, the language was very direct.
Specifically about Taiwan.
Specifically about Taiwan. Xi reportedly warned Trump to be prudent about supplying arms to the island. It was a very clear, do not cross this red line message.
But at the same time, China's foreign ministry publicly stated they have no intention of entering a nuclear arms race.
Which is a fascinating position.
They're playing good cop, bad cop with themselves.
They are. It's a form of strategic ambiguity. They want to appear as the responsible adult in the room on the day the new START treaty expires, while simultaneously signaling unshakable strength on what they consider their core territorial issues.
Let's bring the focus back home now to the United States, because there seems to be a lot of turmoil inside the Department of Homeland Security right now.
There is. This is a story coming out of both Minnesota and Washington, D.C. The Trump administration announced it's withdrawing 700 federal agents from Minnesota.
This follows a period of pretty significant unrest and some very controversial operations there.
It does. But the bigger story, I think, is the internal revolt happening within the agency. You mentioned the ICE Barbie scandal.
Yeah, this sounds messy.
It is. The New York Times and France 24 both have details on this. It centers on James Percival, who is the general counsel for DHS. He's a political appointee.
And he's clashed with the career lawyers at the agency.
Clashed heavily. He reportedly made comments about deep state actors inside the department actively obstructing the administration's immigration agenda.
Okay. And where does the IC Barbie moniker come from?
That apparently surfaced in internal DHS communications. It was a derogatory name used to refer to a specific figure who was allegedly involved in promoting warrantless entries.
Which critics are calling a Fourth Amendment assault.
Right. So the name ICE Barbie became this flashpoint for the unprofessional. And critics say illegal culture that career staffers allege is taking over key parts of the agency.
It sounds like a full-blown civil war inside the agency.
It really is. It's that classic Washington tension between political will and bureaucratic process, but ramped up to an extreme.
And Democrats in Congress are seizing on this.
They are. They're laying out demands for strict new legislative restrictions on how ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, can operate. This is becoming a major proxy battle for the entire immigration debate.
And while all that is happening in the executive branch, over in the judicial branch, the Supreme Court just handed a surprising win to the Democrats.
It's a very surprising one, given the court's makeup. It's about the new congressional redistricting map in California.
The map had been challenged by Republicans.
It had. But the court cleared the new map to go into effect. And the analysis from groups on both sides suggests this solidifies the lines in a way that will likely net the Democrats 5 additional seats in the House of Representatives.
In a House that is split by razor-thin margins, 5 seats is a landslide.
It completely changes the math for the upcoming midterm elections. It's a great example of how redistricting is kind of the dark matter of American politics.
How so?
You don't see it on the news every single night, but it exerts this massive gravitational pull on everything else that happens.
Okay. We have done some heavy lifting. We've talked nuclear war, political infighting, microwave beams.
We have.
Let's take a breath and go to Florida. Because something is happening there that I honestly thought was an urban legend until I saw the photos.
The falling iguanas.
The falling iguanas. It sounds like a plague from the Old Testament. And lo, the lizard shall rain from the sky.
It's actually just basic biology, meteorology. Florida is in the middle of a serious cold form. Snap temperatures are dropping below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 4 Celsius.
And iguanas are not built for that?
Not at all. They're an invasive species there, and they're tropical. They're cold-blooded.
So they freeze solid.
They go into a state called torpor. It's a kind of suspended animation. Their muscles lock up completely.
And they sleep in trees.
They sleep in trees. So when their bodies lock up, they lose their grip on the branches. And gravity takes over.
So you could be out walking your dog and a frozen 3-foot-long lizard just drops on your head.
Essentially, yes. But here's the really weird twist. They aren't dead.
They're not.
No. If you just leave them in the sun for a while, they thaw out, their systems reboot, and they scamper away like nothing happened.
But people aren't just leaving them, are they?
No, the Washington Post reports there's a real mix of reactions. Some compassionate people are collecting them, moving them into their garages to warm up safely.
And the other reactive.
Others know that these are destructive pests. They eat gardens, they undermine seawalls with their burrowing, so people are collecting them for permanent disposal.
It's population control provided by Mother Nature.
Exactly. It's a surreal story. But while the weather in Florida is quirky, the weather elsewhere around the world right now is just deadly. We have to mention Mozambique.
The floods there have been devastating.
Torrential rains have now killed at least 185 people. It is a full-blown humanitarian disaster.
And in Europe, Storm Leonardo has hit Spain and Portugal.
It has. Winds over 100 kilometers per hour. Thousands of people evacuated. It's a major event.
It's just a constant reminder of the volatility of the global climate system.
It is. And speaking of climate and corporate responsibility, there's a story out of Nigeria that highlights a really tricky issue.
This is about gas flaring in the Niger Delta.
Right. So Shell, the oil giant, recently sold its onshore oil fields to a collection of local Nigerian firms.
And on paper, that looks like a good thing, right? A Western multinational is divesting from fossil fuels.
That's how it's spun. It looks like they're cleaning up their portfolio, lowering their corporate emissions.
But the reality on the ground is different.
Completely different. Climate Change News reports that since the sale, gas flaring, which is just the wasteful and polluting practice of burning off excess natural gas, has skyrocketed.
Why?
Because the local firms don't have the same environmental technology, and they certainly don't have the same pressure from international shareholders to reduce their emissions. So they just burn it.
So the Western company gets to claim, we lowered our emissions, but the atmosphere as a whole is actually getting more pollution.
That's the divestment paradox in a nutshell. Passing the buck doesn't solve the problem. It often just hides it in a different company's ledger.
Okay, let's wrap up today with our culture section. The Winter Olympics are officially underway in Milan Cortina, Italy.
They are quietly underway, but it's already been a bit of a rocky start.
I heard about the blackout. You can't make this stuff up.
You really can't. During the curling mixed doubles match, Great Britain versus Norway, the power just went out. The entire arena went pitch black for 3 minutes.
Did they keep sweeping in the dark?
I think they just froze, just like the iguanas in Florida.
But beyond that little glitch, the security situation around the games is incredibly intense.
Very intense. The Italian government claims they've already foiled several Russian cyber attacks that were targeting the game's infrastructure. The city of Milan is basically a fortress, a red zone, with 8,000 police and security personnel on the streets.
And again, this climate angle just keeps coming up.
It's the elephant in the room. Or maybe the snowman in the room. The carbon footprint of these games is just massive.
Mostly because of the artificial snow they have to make?
Almost entirely. One analysis estimated that the carbon footprint for these games will be roughly equal to the annual emissions of the entire country of Somalia.
That is a staggering statistic. It really forces you to ask, in a warming world, is the very idea of a Winter Olympics sustainable anymore?
It might become a relic of a past climate. Speaking of relics that refuse to die, and I say that with the utmost love and respect.
The Muppets.
The Muppets are back.
And apparently they're better than ever.
A 100% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes for the new show on Disney Plus now. And the critics are all pointing to one reason for its success. They refuse to modernize it.
They didn't try to make Fozzie Bear a TikTok influencer or a podcaster.
Thankfully, no. They kept the old vaudeville theater format. They kept the slapstick, the bad puns, the chaos. They kept the heart.
You know, I think there's a real lesson there. We are so obsessed today with updating everything, with making it relevant for a modern audience.
We are.
But sometimes the classic format just works because it tapped into a fundamental human truth. We like a little bit of chaos, and we like a lot of heart.
It's comfort food. In a world of microwave weapons and expiring nuclear treaties, sometimes you just want to see a frog trying to run a show while a bear tells bad jokes.
Absolutely. One last quick hit for the nerds, myself included. Star Trek, the debate over season length.
Ah, yes. Space.com ran a great essay arguing that modern Star Trek is failing its characters because the seasons are too short.
We've gone from the old 26-episode seasons down to 8 or 10 episodes for streaming.
Right. And the argument is that with only 10 episodes, everything has to be plot.
Yeah.
You have to service the season-long arc. You lose the filler episodes.
The ones where characters just play poker in the lounge or get stuck in a turbo lift together and have to talk.
And that's actually where you fall in love with the characters. It's in those quiet moments.
I could not agree more. You need the breathing room. You need the classic bottle episode.
The argument is, if you don't have time to see the characters live, you don't really care when they're in danger of dying.
That is a profound writing tip to end on.
Yeah.
Wow. We have covered a staggering amount of ground today.
We really have.
From the atomic structure of gold all the way to the strategic structure of nuclear treaties.
It's been quite a journey.
So if we have to try and tie a bow on all of this, what's the synthesis? What's the big takeaway?
I keep coming back to this idea of invisible shields.
Invisible shields, okay.
We started by talking about the Earth's magnetic field. This invisible shield that's protecting us all from deadly solar radiation. Then we talked about the New START Treaty, an invisible diplomatic shield that was protecting us from nuclear chaos.
And you even talked about the shield of topology, protecting those little light waves.
Right. In every single one of those cases, we don't really notice the shield is there until it starts to crack.
We take the protection for granted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But whether that shield is geological or geopolitical, it requires maintenance. It requires attention. You have to keep watching the blobs deep inside the Earth, and you have to keep sitting at the negotiating table in Abu Dhabi.
Because if you stop paying attention,
Shield fails.
that is something to chew on. Pay attention to the shields in your own life.
Stay curious.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll be back with you next time.
Enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to The Debate. It is Thursday, February 5th, 2026. Today, the world wakes up to a security architecture that is, well, fundamentally different from the one we went to sleep with. For the first time since the darkest days of the Cold War, the United States and Russia, possessors of 90% of the world's nuclear warheads, are no longer bound by a mutual treaty. The New START agreement has officially expired.
And let's be clear right out of the gate about what expired implies. This isn't just a piece of paper running out of dates. I mean, it means the on-site inspections stop. The data exchanges regarding telemetry, they stop. The notifications of missile movements stop. As of this morning, the two nuclear superpowers are effectively operating in the dark, guessing at each other's capabilities. If that were the only news on the wire today, we'd be advising listeners to stockpile iodine.
We need to dissect today. Precisely because the old guardrails are gone, we are seeing a frantic, almost unprecedented burst of diplomatic engineering. There are secure lines open right now between Washington, Beijing, and Moscow that haven't been used in years. We have trilateral talks kicking off in Abu Dhabi that are substantive, not ceremonial.
Frantic is absolutely the right word.
You call it engineering, I call it damage control. We are watching the international order collapse in real time, from the nuclear treaty expiration to the fracturing of the global economy into hostile blocs.
That is the core question. Is this a collapse, or is it a painful recalibration? I'm the advocate. I look at the evidence, specifically the pragmatic economic shifts involving Venezuela and India, and the diplomatic nuances in the UAE. And I see a system that is bending under pressure, but proving remarkably resilient. We are finding a new equilibrium.
And I'm the dissenter. And I look at those same shifts and I see a free-for-all. When you have to create a critical minerals block just to keep your economy running, and when the street price of silver in Pakistan is telling us more about the dollar's health than the Federal Reserve, the system isn't bending, it's breaking. We are entering an era of raw power politics.
Let's get into the evidence.
Please.
I want to start with the security vacuum you mentioned, specifically New START. The loss of verification is serious. However, we have to weigh the treaty expiration against the real-time behavior of these states. They aren't behaving like nations preparing for immediate Armageddon. They are behaving like nations desperate to establish new rules of the road.
Desperation usually leads to mistakes, not rules.
But it drives engagement. Look at Abu Dhabi. We have a trilateral meeting, Russia, Ukraine, and the United States, happening right now. And this isn't just a photo op. The Kremlin envoy has confirmed progress. Ukrainian officials called the first day substantive and productive. We are on day 1442 of this war, and for the first time in 2 years, the conversation has shifted from total victory to the mechanics of a negotiated settlement. That is the system working to correct itself.
I see why you want to believe that, but let me give you a different perspective on progress. You're mistaking the motion of diplomacy for the mechanism of peace. While they talk in Abu Dhabi, Russian shelling in Druzhkovka killed 7 people yesterday. And let's look at what the key players are actually saying outside the air-conditioned conference rooms. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov gave an interview to RT just hours ago. He didn't sound like a man looking for a middle ground.
It was a tough interview, certainly.
It was scathing. He explicitly called the idea of strategically defeating Russia an illusion. He expressed total skepticism that President Zelensky is even capable of negotiating because, in Lavrov's view, Zelensky is only worried about his own political survival. Lavrov is telling us that the deep state, his words, in Europe is fundamentally dishonest. When one side believes the other is incapable of honesty, treaties don't get signed.
Rhetoric often spikes before a deal is cut. It's leverage. But let's look at the broader European context, because I think your view of a hostile Europe is, well, it's outdated. For 4 years, the European Union has been largely sidelined, letting the U.S. handle Moscow. Suddenly, we have a massive shift. Latvia and Estonia, the Baltic states, usually the most hawkish, the most resistant to engagement, are now calling for a special EU envoy to talk to Russia.
Because they are terrified. They see the U.S. distracted and the treaty gone.
Or because they are pragmatic. French President Macron's envoy is currently in Moscow. If the system were collapsing, these nations would be barricading the doors. Instead, they are opening channels. Even Lavrov, in that same RT interview you cited, admitted that Russia is ready to collaborate if interests are respected. The fact that the Baltic states and France are coordinating a diplomatic re-entry suggests that the Western Bloc is actually becoming more sophisticated. They are realizing that isolation hasn't worked, so they are trying integration.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that interpretation. You call it sophisticated, I call it frantic improvisation, because the security umbrella has holes in it. You're focusing on the diplomats, I'm looking at the hardware. NATO is launching Arctic sentry exercises near Greenland. They are ramping up military presence in the high north because they expect conflict over resources, not collaboration. Russia has already promised to retaliate against what they call illegitimate sanctions and this Arctic buildup. We aren't seeing a de-escalation, we are seeing the front lines widen from the Donbass to the Arctic Circle.
Militarization and diplomacy have always walked hand in hand. It's the speak softly and carry a big stick approach. But I think we need to look at where the actual friction is highest. And right now, that isn't necessarily on the battlefield. It's in the supply chain. You mentioned the rotting foundation of the economy earlier.
It's not just rotting, it's being walled off.
Look at the announcement out of Washington this morning. The U.S. is formalizing this critical minerals trading bloc with the EU, Japan, and Mexico. On the surface, it sounds like a trade agreement. In reality, it is an economic exclusion zone designed specifically to cut China out of the 21st century economy.
That is a heavy interpretation. I see it as diversification. For 20 years, the West allowed a single point of failure, China, to dominate the market. Correcting that isn't an act of war, it's sensible risk management.
Risk management is a euphemism for deglobalization. You have to understand the mechanics here to see why this is so dangerous. This isn't just about digging rocks out of the ground. It's about refining. China controls 90% of the processing capacity for lithium, cobalt, and rare earths. You can mine lithium in Nevada or Mexico all you want, but if you can't turn it into battery-grade carbonate, it's dirt. By trying to create a supply chain that excludes the world's primary processor, the U.S. is essentially fracturing the global market. They are forcing countries to choose. Do you sell to the Western bloc or do you sell to the Asian bloc? You cannot do both. That is the end of the integrated global economy.
But the market is proving smarter than the politicians. While the rhetoric is about blocks, look at what is actually happening with energy. It's fluid. It ignores boundaries. Take Venezuela. Theoretically, they are under heavy sanctions. Theoretically, they are a pariah state in the eyes of Washington.
A pariah that is currently pumping oil.
Exactly. The U.S. has quietly authorized the sale of diluents to Venezuela. Now, for listeners who aren't petroleum engineers, Venezuelan crude is extra heavy. It's almost like tar. You cannot pump it through a pipeline or put it on a ship unless you thin it down with the lighter hydrocarbons, known as diluents. Without U.S. diluents, Venezuelan oil stays in the ground. Washington knows this. They are allowing the diluents in and tacitly allowing India to buy the resulting oil.
So let me get this straight. The U.S. helps Venezuela produce the oil, so Venezuela can sell it to India, so India doesn't have to buy it from Russia.
Precisely. It's a complex trilateral dance. You have the Indian Foreign Ministry spokesman Randhir Jaiswal explicitly stating they are free to buy from any country. The Kremlin says they accept this. The U.S. facilitates it. This doesn't look like a fractured world to me. It looks like a highly sophisticated, pragmatic marketplace where ideology takes a back seat to keeping the lights on.
It looks like a marketplace built on loopholes and desperation. You're describing a system where the rules are ignored whenever it's convenient. And the markets smell that hypocrisy. You can't ignore the death of the dollar narrative that is screaming from the data.
People have been predicting the death of the dollar for 50 years. Bitcoin is volatile. It always has been.
I'm not talking about Bitcoin, though. The 20% crash since the year started is telling. I'm talking about the streets of Islamabad. We have reports coming in that shop owners are seeing a run on silver, not gold. Gold has become too expensive for the average citizen in the global south. People are panic buying silver jewelry, coins, scraps, anything tangible.
Why is that a global indicator rather than a local panic?
Because it's the canary in the coal mine. When the average person in a major developing nation loses faith that their paper money will buy bread next week, they flee to hard assets. That flight to silver in Pakistan is a grassroots vote of no confidence in the global financial order. While Washington plays 4D chess with Venezuelan oil, the foundation of trust in fiat currency is cracking. When people in Islamabad are hoarding silver and the U.S. is trying to wall off critical minerals, we aren't seeing diversification, we are seeing economic warfare, where the neutral ground is disappearing.
That's a compelling anecdote, but let's look at the high-tech sector for a counterexample of integration. TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor giant, is expanding 3-nanometer chip production into Japan.
Which is a hedge against invasion, not a business expansion.
It's integration, and we need to clarify what 3-nanometer means here. We aren't talking about chips for toasters. These are the absolute cutting edge of computing power, the brains required for generative AI, for autonomous systems, for next-generation missiles. This is the most sensitive technology on Earth. If the world were truly fracturing into hostile camps, Taiwan wouldn't be sharing its crown jewels with Japan. This shows that alliances in the Pacific are deepening, not just militarily, but industrially.
Deepening or hardening? Moving that production to Japan is a preparation for the day the fabs in Taiwan go offline. It is the West circling the wagons.
And that brings us to the geopolitical alignments, which are hardening into concrete blocks. Look at the phone logs from Beijing.
You mean the Xi Jinping calls?
I mean the triangulation. Xi Jinping held calls with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump on the same day. That is not an accident. He is coordinating perspectives on Iran and Venezuela with Putin, solidifying a bloc that operates entirely outside Western influence. Lavrov even mentioned Russia is willing to remove enriched uranium from Iran, essentially acting as the guarantor of nuclear safety because they claim the U.S. cannot be trusted. That is an alternative global anchor forming.
But notice the content of the call with Trump. Xi warned him to be prudent regarding arms to Taiwan. In the language of diplomacy, prudent is actually quite restrained. He didn't say or else, he didn't draw a red line, he opened a door for negotiation. And it's not just the superpowers. The global south is no longer just a passive audience.
They are paralyzed by the conflict. Look at the UN.
I see the opposite. I see Latin America asserting itself. We have Brazil and Mexico pushing hard for Chile's former president, Michelle Bachelet, to be the next UN Secretary General. This is the region saying, we are not just pawns in a US-China fight. We are stakeholders. They are trying to seize the institutions to save them. This is Latin America demanding a seat at the head of the table.
Or they are trying to seize them to dismantle them, or at least reorient them away from Western values. You see assertion, I see fragmentation. Look at South Asia. The Pakistan Prime Minister just announced it boycotted the cricket match against India to support Bangladesh.
It's a cricket match.
It is soft power. When you weaponize culture, when you can't even play a game together, the diplomatic channels dry up. It signals to the population that the other is the enemy. Or look at the Middle East. Saudi Arabia and Turkey are forming a unified front on Gaza, demanding action, not asking for it. These aren't countries looking for consensus with the West. They are forming alliances to force the West hand. The era of U.S. hegemony isn't recalibrating. It is being actively dismantled from Brasilia to Islamabad.
But they are using international mechanisms to do it. Saudi and Turkey are demanding action through diplomatic pressure. Brazil and Mexico are pushing a UN candidate. This is participation, not withdrawal. Even the situation with the Clan del Golfo and Colombia suspending talks, it's a setback, yes, but it's happening within a framework where the government is trying to negotiate peace. The ambition for order is there.
Ambition doesn't stop gravity. We are watching the disintegration of the post-Cold War consensus. You mentioned the Abu Dhabi talks earlier. The reality is that while they talk, Russia is preparing for a long war. Lavrov's comments about the dishonest mindset of Western leaders suggest a fundamental breakdown in trust that no amount of trilateral meetings can fix. When there is no trust, treaties like New START expire. When there is no trust, you buy gold. When there is no trust, you build trading blocks that exclude your rivals.
And yet, on the very day New START expires, the diplomats are in the room. That is the point I keep coming back to. The impulse to destroy is being matched pound for pound by the impulse to manage. We aren't seeing a runaway escalation. We are seeing a controlled burn.
A controlled burn can still burn the house down if the wind changes.
Let's zoom out for the conclusion. We have two very different maps of the world here.
We do.
My view is that while the headlines scream crisis, and yes, treaties ending and markets fluctuating are crises, the underlying reality is one of intense, sophisticated diplomacy. The world is talking. In Abu Dhabi, peace is being engineered, however slowly. In Tokyo, chips are being made. In the triangle between Caracas, New Delhi, and Washington, energy flows are being managed pragmatically. The planetary perspective isn't an apocalypse. It's adaptation. The system is stressed, but it is finding a new equilibrium.
And my conclusion is that adaptation is just a euphemism for the law of the jungle. We are now living in a world without the safety net of New START. The death of the dollar isn't a theory anymore. It's a trend visible in the gold charts and the silver markets of Pakistan. We are seeing the weaponization of everything, from critical minerals to cricket matches. The institutions you trust are being bypassed by raw power politics. We are entering an era of high-stakes improvisation, and history tells us that improvisation usually leads to accidents.
We can agree on one thing. 2026 marks the definitive end of the post-Cold War era. The training wheels are off.
Absolutely.
And for our listeners, I would say, don't just watch the press conferences. Watch the price of gold and watch the outcome of those talks in Abu Dhabi. Those are the true indicators of where the planet goes next.
Thank you for joining the debate.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.